Hello everybody and welcome to I Just Played, my series in which I talk about a game that I just played, and I just played Sword of the Berserk Guts Rage on the Sega Dreamcast. Now, as this is the first episode of this new series, I want to talk about what it is. It's really just my way of discussing a game that I've been playing. There's not going to be too much history and just going to be a lot more light-hearted and less structured than my other videos. Call them a middle ground between Let's Plays and reviews. I'll be talking about what I liked and didn't like, showing you a broad spectrum of the game, and probably inserting some random memories and tangents here and there. The first game I decided to beat for this series was one I've been wanting to talk about on my channel for a long time, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll see why. It's a game that's based on the manga Berserk. It's not a manga that I've read, so I won't be able to pick up any similarities or differences to the source material. If anyone that watches this video is a fan of the Berserk manga or anime, and notices anything in this video that's interesting or is majorly different, let me know in the comments. So when the game starts up, you get this warning. If a game starts with a piece of text like that, you know it's not messing around. It says you have to be mature to play this, and luckily, I am very mature.
17% APR!
So you start the game and you're presented with a very long cutscene. It's clear the creators were very proud of these cutscenes, because not only does the back of the case claim that the game has engrossing cinematic movie sequences, they last bloody ages, and are often way longer than the levels they bookend. The first thing I notice is that the graphics are pretty great, not only for the Dreamcast, but they rival most early PS2 games. They are crisp and detailed, but it is let down by the heavy fog which hangs over everything. But this again isn't very different to many of the early PS2 offerings. When the gameplay starts, it just starts. There are no explanations, there's no tutorial, you just start immediately getting jumped on by bad guys. This results in a manic few seconds of button mashing, trying to figure out what all the buttons do and how you can fight back. The controls for the game are actually pretty simple. You can use the shoulder buttons to pull out or holster your sword and use items, and the face buttons jump, slide and attack. But that's pretty much it. The smart thing to do would have been to pause the game and read the manual to find this out, but that's no fun, it's better to just jump in. It's a hack and slash game, and in many ways it's a predecessor to titles like Devil May Cry and Onimusha, featuring quite similar styles of combo based gameplay, but it is a little cruder and less refined. There is plenty of blood and gore too, so if that sort of thing offends you, let me remind you that this game is only for mature audiences. Only a mature audience should play this game. I don't like this thing, it bugs me out. It doesn't seem to belong in the same universe as everything else. I don't know about the manga, but everything else in this game has a dark, twisted, gloomy tone, and then this Disney reject pops up and starts popping jokes and bringing all the comic relief, which immediately falls flat. I don't think it works. This game has some truly messed up monster design. If you want an idea what this game is going for, think of Tetsuo at the end of Akira crossed with Treebeard and you'll be on the right track. The boss fights in this game are pretty simple, and they really define hack and slash, just slash them till they drop. I've already talked about the dark atmosphere, but it really does hang over this game. It's oppressive and it sets a great tone. It's the perfect setting for an action game, and it adds to the creepy nature and disturbing imagery that they was going for. The design really is great, and I think when looking back at games of this era, they actually appear a little more creepy nowadays than they did back then. Something about the slightly blurry, blocky graphics just adds a sense of unease to it all that games in high definition can have trouble meeting. There's just something about these sort of graphics which just makes me feel like I'm in another world a little more.
I'm Balzac.
Balzac.
These huge sword wounds. Was it you? Did you do this?
Baron Balzac asks if the huge sword wounds on the giant dead monster were caused by the only man around wielding a giant sword, which is a great way to introduce a character because it gives us, the viewer, and the player a good understanding of his intelligence. To cap it off, he then introduces himself as Balzac, despite the fact that his servant just announced it clearly in his presence to pretty much the only person that was still around.
Everyone stand back! Baron Balzac is here for an inspection.
I'm Balzac.
Oh my. Take this image out of context and you probably think it was the back cover to one of those weird knockoff DVDs you can find. Talk about disturbing imagery. The fact that somebody animated this was somebody's job for a day, was to make the lady pull that face at the floating fairy whilst the Baron Balzac is explaining to a man with a giant sword why a disease can turn people into giant tree monsters, is something that I find endless enjoyment from. This game is full of this type of moment. It sometimes does feel strangely like an 80s anime that has been dubbed a little awkwardly, which is not something that I think was intended. And now we get to what is the first proper level of the game, the previous ones just being a short prologue and a boss battle. This is when you start to notice the similarities to later entries in the genre even more. The fixed camera angles, disturbing backgrounds, and fighting wave after wave of enemy. What it doesn't have, that many of those later games have, is any kind of real exploration. It's a very linear game. Occasionally, there is a QuickTime event, which if you miss it, you might go down a slightly different path, but that's really it for the variety. This level was also when you first start to notice the one major problem of the game, which starts off as a bit of an annoyance, but ends up being a major flaw in the game design. You see, Guts is a character with a gigantic sword. That means when he swings it around, he's going to need a bit of space. Unfortunately, the game designers made two errors when converting this weapon into video game format. The first was that they designed most of the levels to be narrow, with small rooms and streets, so there are plenty of walls. The second, and the reason the first one is a problem, is that they added some physics in, so when your sword hits an object, it bounces straight off. This causes massive difficulty, because there are some parts in the game when you just can't bloody hit anything. You have to awkwardly try and slide and jump to a different section, or just get one or two hits off. It's very frustrating, and could easily have been resolved by just letting the sword pass through the walls, or making the levels bigger. There is a way to punch and holster the sword, but it's so weak and it's pretty much pointless, and to make it worse, the enemies don't flinch when you hit them with the punch, so there's no point. To prepare for this video, I was taking notes as I was playing the game, and I swear at least half of them just said the phrase, "Sword is too big, can't hit anything." So after that level you proceed down some city streets fighting lots of people. It becomes a little more like a beat 'em up in these sections, because the same enemies pop up over and over and over again, so it did become a little tedious. The game is so much better when you can actually use your weapon and fight like the game intended. You start to notice the little things, the atmosphere, the level design, even the cool cape physics. It's almost as if they wanted to make the real game a treat for getting through the annoying parts, as if you had to earn the right to enjoy the game. One thing I haven't mentioned so far is the Berserk mode. When you've dished out enough damage to enemies, Guts' eyes start glowing red and you become invulnerable to pain and deal out the hurt a lot more. It's kinda cool, but again I find myself relating it to Devil May Cry's Devil Trigger. I wonder if the creators of DMC ever mentioned this game as an inspiration. I'd hazard not, I think it might have been. So then we arrive at the inevitable swamp stage, and this is when the game really starts to dial up the horrific imagery. These creatures are total abominations. They are unbelievably freaky, but it does make a nice change of pace to fight things which aren't human. The only creature I don't find freaky are these little mutant frogs. They look faintly ridiculous. Of all the terrors of the swamp and forest that the creators could think to transform into monsters, I will never know why they thought frogs would be a good choice for that. Yes, you do get frogs in a swamp, but those guys are just too cute to be bad. So after the swamps and the mountains and some more towns, you end up at another boss. This boss is the hardest one in the game, much harder than any of the final ones, and it's for one specific reason. Guts is just not mobile. He's designed to fight like a tank, stand his ground and cut up anything that's in his way. The problem with that approach is that this boss is way stronger, so if you slug it out going toe to toe, you will die over and over again. The options Guts has to get around this are to block, slide and jump. Blocking works some of the time, but this boss can attack from the side of his tail or pick up and throw, both of which go through a block. Sliding is the best option, but it's so clunky and directionless that often you slide right into the boss. It's difficult to explain why the control is clunky, but if you think about how action games today work, if you're in the middle of a combo, you can cancel out of it to roll out of the way. In this game you can't do that, you have to wait for the animation to fully stop before you can then slide, which means if you press your attack just one too many times, you can't slide out of the way. Finally, jumping is okay sometimes as it causes the enemy to slightly flinch, but it also leaves you wide open. This boss was a bloody nightmare to beat, but using a combination of the above and getting very lucky, I eventually got there. Even though it was a tough fight, it's not really that frustrating, because the game is actually very nice with its continues. They start literally the second you press start after dying, and they fully replenish all of your items. After this follows a number of other boss battles. There's a really creepy tree baby thing before you fight Mr. Ballsack in his evolved form. Both battles are pretty simple. Then you get to the most horrific boss in the game, and the one that will keep you up at night. It's a giant floating mandrake baby, and those eyes strike fear into my heart. That thing is a nightmare. The graphics on it, though, are pretty good. It reminds me of something you might see in Resident Evil 4. It also looks a little bit like a Diddy-ROM. People like to laugh at games that have 15 or 18 labels on nowadays, saying they're pretty tame, but I think this game earned its title screen warning. It definitely has disturbing imagery, which is only for mature audiences. Only mature audiences should play this game. The final boss of the game is actually probably the easiest of all. It's kind of a mishmash of various things stitched together. You can definitely see the anime origins in a boss like this. So that's the game, and what did I think? Well, it's a pretty short game. Most of the runtime is filled up by cutscenes, and whilst they may have looked cool in 1999, they don't hold up too well now, and just serve to slow down the pace of the game. Being short though serves the game well. It doesn't linger around long enough to really get bothered around the negative aspects, and is overall just a fun little action hack and slasher. It might be nice for it to get a re-release on Steam or something. I just looked on eBay and it seems the price has ballooned since I bought it, which is a little ridiculous. Most of the eBay prices seem to come from someone looking at what a game is selling for on eBay, and then they put their game on a few quid higher, and eventually it all just spirals upwards. Of course, collectors don't want to complain if they have the game, since it means they made a good investment, and sellers just want to make money, and many are happy to sit on the games not worrying if they sell or not. But it just means that the market is artificially expanding upwards. It's a shame because it means there are plenty of gamers which just can't play these sort of games anymore without emulating, and whilst that's fine, it can't replicate perfectly the experience. Anyway, Sword of the Berserk, pretty good game, kinda dated, creative and disturbing visuals, some problems with controls on the sword, but overall it's fun and I'd recommend it. Thanks for watching the first I Just Played. I'm really looking for feedback on what you liked and didn't like about this video. The format will be evolving, so it'll all really be useful. I also really need recommendations for games to play in the future, especially ones which will provide an interesting watch. These can be from any generation. Hopefully I'll have it, but if I don't, I'm sure I can track it down. If you want to keep with me, click the subscribe button and ring the bell so you'll be notified whenever I publish something new. Goodbye!